It's seconds out as Europe and America lock horns. It's twice as big versus twice as fast. You can't beat the simplicity of a 1930s Tiger Moth.
Whoa! Hey! Superb!
But I wouldn't want to fly to New York in one.
The aviation revolution was an incredible thing. Once designers got the bit between their teeth, so to speak, once they got their heavy metal airborne, developments proceeded at an incredible rate. Within 30 years of the development of the Tiger Moth, two teams of designers were at work developing the most unimaginable creation.
One team decided to build a plane twice as big as anything else in the sky, but the other team went for speed. They wanted to bring supersonic flight to the masses.
A succession of military aircraft had already exceeded Mach 2, that's twice the speed of sound, but they were highly dangerous and very often lethal to their crews. Who on earth would dream of putting 100 passengers in a civilian airliner, sipping champagne in air-conditioned comfort, where you could go to the potty and not even think about spilling your coffee?
Just who would be so crazy? Well, try the politicians of France and Britain. The two former superpowers would stop at nothing to get one over on the Americans, to be the first to send passengers through the sound barrier. It may have seemed bonkers, but what they built was an aviation legend. Slender, sexy, and faster than a bullet. Concorde. Flying at 1,300 miles per hour, it barely worked up a sweat. And if that's hard to believe today, imagine what people thought back in the 1950s when designers announced their plans. We didn't even have calculators back then. If they wanted to fly passengers at Mach 2, designers would have to overcome a series of enormous technological hurdles.
Concorde, of course, was going to be subject to temperatures and pressures and heating effects, which no passenger aircraft had ever been subjected to before. In fact, Concorde grew by 10 inches on every single flight and then shrank back again at the end when it got back on the ground, simply because of heat expansion. And nobody knew what this would do over time to the structure of the airplane.
Friction on the airframe would heat the body of the plane to a scorching 127 degrees centigrade.
That's hotter than any other passenger airplane. In fact, you could even fry your breakfast on it. That'll be done quite nicely in a couple of minutes. Whilst the Europeans were betting their shirts and everybody travelling around at twice the speed of sound, for Boeing, their vision of the future was very different. Their vision was big.
Americans had never been shy about unleashing huge aircraft into the skies. Unfortunately, planes like the Spruce Goose never really took off. By the 1960s, the success of Boeing's early jets had convinced them that the time was right to bring out their specially extended tape measures. The 747, the jumbo jet, was born. It would be twice the size of anything else in the skies, a quantum leap in aviation. Boeing were betting on the jumbo being a winner with the airlines. More space meant they could carry more passengers, 400 of them, and, almost as importantly, more freight. Well, that was the theory. The reality almost led them to bankruptcy. The 747 was a huge gamble for Boeing. In fact, during production, the company went $460 million in debt. Somebody put up a billboard outside the production plant. It read, "Will the last person to leave Seattle please turn out the lights?" Back in Europe, with the unlimited supply of two nations' treasuries, money was no obstacle. But working out how to get their new plane through the sound barrier was. No matter how much power you've got, an airplane's speed is limited by its shape. The real headache for Concorde designers was that the things that stop you flying super fast are what keep you in the air: your wings. The designers looked to the military. To slip through the sound barrier, fighter jets were using streamlined, wafer-thin delta wings. Perfect for nimble military planes, but would they work for a large commercial airliner? This is one of 4 prototypes built to find out whether or not supersonic passenger travel could become a reality. And what you see before you is the designer's conundrum. A delta wing which performed beautifully at Mach 2, but which unfortunately has lousy lift characteristics at slow speed. Designers would need to make their delta wing act like a normal wing. And how do they work? Well, pay attention, because here comes the clever bit. Wings all work on air pressure, all of them. The air, as it hits the leading edge of the wing, splits into 2. One goes over the top, one bit goes underneath the bottom. If you notice, the bottom is flat, the top is curved. But a very clever guy discovered that both parcels of air arrive at the back of the wing at the same time. Therefore, this one, which has to travel further, it must go faster. If it goes faster, the molecules all get spread out. That means less pressure on the top, means more pressure on the bottom relatively, and bingo, the aeroplane lifts into the sky, as long as you've got enough speed. So why not stick a massive jet on a Tiger Moth and go supersonic that way? Well, the lift characteristics of the Tiger Moth with 4 wings worked very well at slow speeds like this. But the drag characteristics were appalling. The thing is a flying brick. And bricks don't go supersonic. So if a traditional high-lift wing creates too much drag, how did Concorde designers get slow speed lift from their slippery, thin, supersonic delta wing? The answer was in the wind tunnel. After 5,000 hours of testing, they crafted a carefully curved, drooping wing, which caused the air to rapidly spiral across the top. These vortices created the magical reduction of pressure at slow speed and high angles of attack that was needed to get Concorde into the air. Phew, that was the easy bit. Now all they needed were the power plants.